There comes a time when the weight you've carried for years suddenly feels lighter, and you don't even realize it at first. You wake up not with a forced smile, but with peace that doesn't need an explanation. The war you once fought with yourself, it's quieter now. And that silence, that's not emptiness. That's healing. That's growth. That's the sound of your shadow finally releasing its grip on your soul. See, life has a way of burying us in guilt, shame, fear, and unhealed wounds. But there is a moment, maybe in the middle of the night, maybe after a tear-soaked prayer, where you feel the shift. You are no longer chained to your old self. You are no longer operating from your wounds. You are moving from your wisdom now. This ain't about pretending to be perfect. It's about knowing your past and choosing not to live in it. It's about seeing your scars and understanding they were never signs of weakness. They were battle medals. And now you're walking with power, with peace. If you're listening right now, you already feel it. Something inside of you has changed. And I'm here to tell you exactly what that change looks like. You remember how it used to be. Someone would say something that hit that tender part of you. Maybe they questioned your worth. Maybe they triggered your deepest fear, and just like that, you were gone. Rage would rise, tears would fall, silence would consume you, or your voice would tremble in a way you hated. You weren't just responding to them, you were reliving every wound you hadn't healed. And the worst part, you knew it. You knew you were better than that, but the pain would hijack you before you had a chance to think. That wasn't weakness. That was your shadow speaking first. That was your old self trying to survive in a world that kept poking its fingers into your soul. And now things are different. You've learned the power of pause, the holy strength of stillness. You've learned to hold space between what's done to you and what you do next. You breathe. You don't lose yourself just because someone else is lost. That is wisdom. That is healing in motion. You don't react because you've realized not everything deserves your energy. Your time, your presence, your emotional investment, they're sacred now. You used to hand them out like they were endless, but that was before you learned what it costs to keep giving your soul to chaos. When someone disrespects you now, you don't need to scream. Your silence speaks louder. When someone doubts you, you don't argue. You let your growth answer for you. See, reaction is impulsive. It's loud, it's messy, and it often ends in regret. But response is rooted, it comes from clarity. It says, I see what's happening, and I refuse to lose myself in it. You've grown out of the need to fight every battle, because not every battle is worth your light. Sometimes peace is the greatest act of power. You don't let the world pull you back into who you used to be. That's strength most people won't recognize. But that doesn't matter to you anymore. You don't live to be seen, you live to stay whole. There was a time you mistook silence for weakness. You thought if you didn't defend yourself, people would walk all over you. But now you understand something deeper. Sometimes silence is the loudest form of self-respect. You're no longer eager to convince anyone of your worth. You felt what it's like to over-explain, to over-apologize, to overextend, and it left you empty. So now you respond from a place of overflow, not desperation. You've built inner wealth, emotional wealth. You don't react because you don't need approval like you used to. You're rooted in self-trust. When chaos knocks, you don't open the door and panic. You look through the peephole and decide if it's even worth your energy. And if it's not, you keep walking. You've earned that peace through fire, through mistakes, through heartbreaks that once tore you open and showed you who you were pretending to be. But no more. That version of you is done. Now you move with calm. Not because life is easier, but because you've become harder to shake. And it's not just about what you say or don't say. It's about what you feel. Where once you felt rage or panic bubble to the surface at the slightest push, now you feel grounded. Someone can throw a storm your way, and inside, there's stillness. Not numbness, not apathy, real stillness. That's power. That's self-mastery. You've faced the shadows that used to own you. You sat with your inner child and listened to what they needed. You stopped running, you stopped distracting, you stopped blaming, and in that raw honesty, something beautiful happened. You started to rise. Quietly, daily, stubbornly, you started to heal. And that healing didn't shout, it whispered. It said, wait, think, feel, don't react, just breathe. So now, when the world tries to provoke you, you don't get dragged. You don't fall for the bait. You stand still and you respond on your term. That's evolution. People around you might not understand this change. They may say you've become cold, distant, unbothered. But what they don't see is the journey it took to get here. They don't see the nights you cried, alone, questioning everything, rebuilding your identity piece by piece. They don't know the cost of your peace. So let them talk. Let them wonder. You don't owe the world an explanation for how you protect your energy. You don't have to react to opinions that don't matter. You've upgraded your standards, not out of pride, but out of survival. You respond from wisdom now because you've lived through enough to know that most people speak from their own wounds. And you've learned not to bleed just because someone else is hurting. That's not cold. That's healing. That's strength. That's discernment. You don't wear your heart on your sleeve anymore. You wear it in your chest, protected, sacred, and whole. And yes, you still feel. You still care. But the way you express it has changed. You used to be quick to yell, to cry, to plead. Now, you pause. You ask yourself, is this mine to carry? Is this my storm to stand in? Because not everything deserves your fire. You used to light yourself on fire just to keep others warm. Now you've become the flame that knows its worth. And your light, it's steady. It doesn't flicker just because someone walks away. You don't chase after people like you used to. You don't need everyone to stay. You've stopped reacting to rejection as if it defines you, because now you define you. You answer to something higher. Your peace, your purpose, your God-given direction. And when your values lead, emotions follow. That's real power. That's what response over reaction looks like. This wisdom didn't come from books, it came from life, from being broken and rebuilding, from apologizing too many times, from learning to sit with discomfort instead of numbing it. It came from watching yourself spiral and deciding no more. You made a choice to grow. And growth doesn't always look beautiful. Sometimes it looks like walking away without a word. Sometimes it looks like shaking but staying silent. Sometimes it looks like choosing solitude over approval. You didn't get here overnight. But now that you're here, you guard it, you protect the healed version of you like it's the most valuable thing you've ever known, because it is. And when life tries to pull you back into the old you, you remember the cost. You remember the pain, and you choose differently. You choose peace over power struggles. You choose clarity over chaos. You choose response. What's wild is that this version of you was always there. It was just buried under survival. Buried under trauma, under expectations, under the lies you were told about who you had to be. But the truth, the real you doesn't panic under pressure. The real you doesn't need to scream to be heard. The real you doesn't entertain drama or fight to prove anything. The real you is calm, collected, convicted. And now the more you live from that space, the more the old world feels foreign. The triggers that used to run your life don't even hit the same. They show up, but they don't take root. You see them, you nod, and then you move on. That's growth. That's a healed nervous system. That's your shadow no longer dominating your energy. You're not performing for survival anymore. You're living from truth. And truth is, your emotions are valid, but not all of them need to lead. You honor them, you feel them, but you don't worship them. You don't let them make your choices anymore. You become the observer. You watch the storm inside, but you don't become it. That's a level of emotional intelligence that some people never reach. Not because they can't, but because they're afraid to do the work. But you weren't afraid. You faced your demons. You walked through fire and you came out refined, not destroyed. That's why your energy is different now. That's why you're not reacting like you used to. You're no longer ruled by fear. You're no longer hijacked by triggers. You've tasted freedom. And you're not going back. And that's the beauty of response. It doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're powerful in a way that doesn't need to be loud. You make choices now that honor your peace. You walk away when it's time. You speak only when your words carry weight. You trust that not every storm needs your presence. You understand that some battles are designed to drain you, not grow you. And so you step back, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. You don't react to every noise because you've found your inner silence. And that silence, that's your sanctuary now. That's your compass. That's your proof that the shadow no longer leads. The light in you does. You remember what it felt like to be a prisoner of your own emotions, to feel like your triggers had the final say in how your day would go. One word, one look, one unexpected reminder of the past, and you were gone, drowning, spiraling. You'd try to smile, pretend like it didn't shake you, but inside you were screaming. People saw the calm on your face, but they didn't see the war in your mind. They didn't see how much energy it took just to stay standing. You weren't weak. You were raw. And those triggers, they had power because you hadn't been given the tools to understand them. They weren't the enemy. They were the messenger. They came to show you where you were still bleeding. And now you don't run from them. You don't collapse under them. You face them. You breathe through them. You sit with the discomfort instead of letting it define you. That's not just growth. That's rebirth. That's how you know you're healing, because the same storm that once broke you now passes through you without destroying everything you've built. You used to think avoiding your triggers was strength. If you didn't go near them, if you didn't talk about it, maybe they'd go away. But they never did. They hid in silence. They lingered in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to remind you of your unfinished pain. And every time life hit the same nerve, you'd feel powerless all over again, but not anymore. You've learned that healing isn't about avoiding pain, it's about walking into it with new eyes. You no longer fear what used to haunt you because you've gone into the fire and made peace with the flames. You've traced the source of your triggers back to the wounds, the betrayals, the memories, and instead of pretending they didn't matter, you chose to listen. You chose to feel it all without losing yourself. And now you carry the same history, but it doesn't carry you. You hold it, but it doesn't hold you hostage. You're not afraid of being reminded anymore because your response is no longer panic, it's presence. There's a stillness in you now, a kind of peace that isn't loud, but it's unshakable. You walk into rooms that used to feel threatening and you're centered. You hear words that once sent you spiraling and now you pause instead of reacting. Not because you're numb, not because you don't care, but because your triggers don't sit in the driver's seat anymore. You do. You don't let an old version of you make choices for the healed version of you. You don't let the child who was hurt dictate how the adult moves through the world. You honor that child, you listen to them, but you lead now. And when pain rises, when anger flares, when sadness knocks, you don't shove it away. You invite it in like a guest. You ask it what it needs. That's real emotional maturity. That's power. Not in the absence of emotion, but in your ability to hold emotion without letting it break you. You're not triggered by the same things because you've reclaimed the power they had over you. You used to flinch when someone raised their voice. You used to shut down when someone left you unread or walked away. You'd spiral, thinking it was your fault, thinking it confirmed every insecurity you ever had. But now, you don't jump to those conclusions. You don't project your pain onto every person who enters your life. You don't expect abandonment just because you were once left behind. You don't assume betrayal just because you've been broken before. You've separated your past from your present. And that separation, that's liberation. You live from truth now, not fear. You no longer need to guard yourself like you're constantly under attack. You don't let every trigger become a prophecy. You let them be what they are, signs, signals. Nothing more, nothing less. People may not notice this change in you, but you do. You feel it in the way you sleep better, in the way you breathe deeper, in the way your mind doesn't race at every silence, doesn't panic at every shift in tone. You feel it when someone says something sharp, and instead of reacting, you reflect. You ask yourself, is this about them or about me? You have that space now, that sacred pause between stimulus and response. That's what separates the wounded from the healed. And you've stepped into healing with both feet. You're not scared of the mirror anymore. You don't need everyone to be perfect so you can stay balanced. You've learned how to stay grounded even when the world tilts. And that is something no one can give you. You earned that. There were days you thought you'd never get here. Days when the pain felt louder than your hope. Days when you'd get triggered and feel like a failure, wondering if you'd ever feel normal. But healing isn't linear. It's not a straight road. It's a spiral staircase. You rise, you fall, but you always come back stronger. And now, you realize that every trigger that used to own you was just an invitation to come home to yourself. They weren't here to destroy you. They were here to wake you up, to remind you where you'd given your power away, and you took it back, piece by piece, breath by breath. You stopped fighting the feelings and started listening to them. You stopped avoiding the pain and started honoring it. That's why you don't explode anymore. You don't shut down. You don't escape. You respond with grace, with power, with presence. You're not perfect, but you're aware. And awareness changes everything. You catch yourself now before you spiral. You hear that old voice creeping in, the one that says you're not enough, the one that wants to panic or lash out. And you stop it. You recognize it. You tell it not today. That voice used to run your life, but now you run the voice. You hold the pen. You write your story. And your story is no longer a collection of reactions. It's a narrative of redemption, a testimony of someone who walked through pain and didn't let it harden them. Someone who felt the fire and still chose love. You don't let fear script your decisions. You don't let trauma speak louder than your purpose. That's how you know your triggers don't control you anymore, because they show up and you don't shrink. You stand tall. You choose better. There's nothing more powerful than someone who has faced their triggers and stayed standing. Not bitter, not broken, just whole. You've taken the ugliest parts of your story and turned them into wisdom. You've made peace with things you never thought you could speak about, and you've done it quietly. No audience, no applause, just you in the dark, doing the work. That's the kind of growth that doesn't make headlines, but it changes lives. You're no longer the same. You don't flinch at shadows. You don't brace for impact every time life gets quiet. You trust now, not because it's easy, but because you've earned that right. You've earned the right to walk through this world without your past gripping your throat. You've earned the right to feel safe inside your own body again. That's what it means to be free. And freedom isn't loud, it's soft. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are, who's no longer moved by every comment, every glance, every disappointment. You used to be reactive because you were surviving. Now you respond because you are living. And when your triggers show up now, they meet someone different, someone grounded, someone anchored, someone who can feel the wave and still choose the shore. That's how you know your healing is real. Not because you don't feel pain, but because pain no longer owns your reaction. You are no longer a puppet of your past. You are the author of your future. And every time you breathe through what used to break you, you rise. There comes a moment in your healing where you realize that waiting on someone else to make things right is like waiting for a storm to apologize for the rain. You could spend years hoping they'll understand what they did, hoping they'll look you in the eye and say, "I'm sorry for how I hurt you." But sometimes that apology never comes. And you know what? That's okay. Because real forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of resentment. It's about taking your power back. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. You deserve a heart that's not heavy with what they did. You deserve nights where you can sleep without replaying the same betrayal over and over. Forgiveness without an apology is not weakness, it's strength in its purest form. It's the ability to rise above what tried to reduce you. You're not letting them off the hook. You're removing yourself from the grip of their mistake. That's a different kind of power. You used to think forgiveness had to be earned, that if someone didn't own up to what they did, you couldn't let go. But that only kept you chained to their silence. You were giving your healing timeline to someone who may never be ready to take responsibility, and that realization hurt. It cut deep. Because you don't want to carry the pain, but you don't want to let it go either. Not without justice. But then you reached a point where holding on to it cost you more than releasing it. The anger, the bitterness, the tears. It wasn't punishing them, it was punishing you. And one day you woke up and said, enough. You decided to stop watering the roots of pain just because they refused to tend to the garden they destroyed. That's when you understood. Forgiveness is an act of self-respiration. You're not saying what they did was okay. You're saying, I refuse to let what you did decide how I love, how I breathe, how I live. Forgiveness without an apology is the highest form of emotional maturity because it means you've grown past needing someone else to validate your hurt. You validated it yourself. You sat in the pain, acknowledged it, felt it, and chose to heal it. You stopped needing them to say the words you longed to hear. You started speaking those words to yourself. You didn't deserve that. It wasn't your fault. You matter. And slowly the grip of their absence, their denial, their cowardice, it loosened. You forgave because you wanted to move forward without carrying their shadow on your back. That takes courage most people don't understand. That takes soul work. You had to look at the wound, stitch it yourself, and walk again with a scar that reminds you not of them, but of how strong you were to survive them. That's what real forgiveness looks like: brutal honesty, sacred release. There were days you wanted to scream, days you thought if you could just make them see, make them feel what you felt, maybe you'd get closure. But you realized closure isn't given, it's created. And sometimes it comes in the form of silence. You stop chasing accountability from people who lack the integrity to give it. You stopped rehearsing speeches in your head for an apology that was never coming. You closed the door without slamming it. You healed without making them a part of the process. And that is divine power. That is spiritual clarity. That is the moment you realize your healing is no longer attached to their confession. You're no longer waiting, you're walking, you're moving, you're rising. And in that rising, you find everything they never gave you: closure, clarity, and calm. You forgive now because your peace is more important than your pride. You forgive because you understand that carrying their wrongdoing in your soul is like drinking poison, hoping they'll feel the sickness. And you're done poisoning yourself just to stay mad. You'd rather be free. You'd rather feel the sun again. You've seen what unforgiveness does. It steals joy. It keeps the wound fresh. But it gives you your future back. It lets you show up to your life without the bitterness leaking into every room. It lets you love again, trust again, breathe again. You didn't choose the pain, but you chose what to do with it. You chose to grow. And now, forgiveness isn't something you give because they asked for it. It's something you give because your heart is too sacred to be a battlefield forever. You remember the people who hurt you, not to stay angry, but to remember how far you've come. You remember how their betrayal broke you and how you rebuilt from the ruins. You remember how you wept, how you screamed, how you begged God for justice. And now you thank God for healing, because even without an apology, you found your way back. You didn't need them to undo what they did. You just needed to believe that what they didn't undo you. And you've proven that. You've proven that your strength doesn't come from retaliation. It comes from redemption. You chose forgiveness not to forget, but to stop reliving. And now their silence no longer dictates your story. Your forgiveness rewrote the narrative, and it's a story of resilience. Forgiving without an apology doesn't mean you allow people to walk over you. It means you've learned how to walk away without dragging the pain with you. You set boundaries now, not because you're angry, but because you're wise. You protect your peace. You recognize the difference between love and manipulation, between apology and accountability. You don't need them to say sorry to know your worth. You know who you are. You know what you deserve. You forgive, but you don't forget the lesson. And that's the beautiful balance. Keeping your heart open without leaving it unguarded. That's maturity. That's mastery. That's what it means to love yourself enough to let go. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. No revenge, no confrontation, just peace. Just a quiet, bold release. You walk away from the chaos and choose stillness. You leave their name in God's hands and move on. That's not giving up. That's rising up. That's deciding your life is too valuable to keep recycling the same old pain. You don't need them to see your worth anymore. You see it, you carry it, and you walk in it daily. That's what forgiveness without an apology looks like. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's not posted for attention. It's sacred. It's private. It's for you, and it changes everything. You've looked your past in the face and said, "You don't own me." You've stared down the betrayal, the heartbreak, the abandonment. And instead of becoming bitter, you became better. You became someone who can say, "Yes, they hurt me. Yes, they never said sorry. And still, I found peace." That peace is your victory. That peace is your power. That peace is the proof that healing doesn't need permission. You gave yourself the closure they withheld. And that makes you dangerous. And that makes you untouchable. Because when you forgive without the apology, you show the world that you're led by purpose, not pain. That you're fueled by grace, not grudges. And that kind of heart changes everything. There comes a time in your life when you finally get tired of explaining yourself to people who were never trying to understand you. Tired of trying to prove your worth to people who were committed to misunderstanding you. You reach a moment where you stop chasing approval and start chasing purpose, and that's the moment everything changes. Because proving yourself is a prison, but purpose is freedom. You don't need to perform anymore. You don't need to convince anyone that you're enough. You don't need to keep showing up just to prove them wrong. You've learned that when your energy is spent trying to get validation, it leaves no room for your own growth. And now you don't need their recognition. You've recognized yourself. You've met the version of you that knows they were called to something higher. You were never meant to fit in their box. You were meant to break out and build something bigger. And you're doing it not out of revenge, not out of pride, but out of purpose. That's the difference. You used to burn yourself out trying to be seen. You thought that if you worked harder, achieved more, smiled wider, sacrificed deeper, eventually they'd clap for you. Eventually they'd say, "You did it. You proved us wrong." But all that effort, it left you empty. Because you realize that applause means nothing when it comes from the wrong room. You could pour your whole soul into proving yourself and still feel unseen, still feel unworthy, still feel like you're not enough. And then you asked yourself, what if I stopped trying to impress and just started living? What if I let go of the need to be liked and started honoring the path I was truly made for? That's when purpose found you. It didn't come with loud fanfare or flashy rewards. It came quietly in the stillness, in the truth that was always there. You were made to be real, not perfect. You were made to serve, not perform. And now your life is about legacy, not likes. Purpose doesn't shout. It doesn't scream for attention. It doesn't care about trends or timelines. It whispers to you in the quiet moments when no one is watching. It reminds you why you started. It pulls you away from distraction and back into direction. When you choose purpose, you don't move like everyone else. You're not in a race. You're not in a contest. You're not trying to prove who's ahead. You're just walking your walk. And the beauty is, once you stop trying to prove yourself, your spirit calms down, your mind clears up. You see people differently. You no longer need to compete with them. You start cheering them on, even when they're running faster, because their journey has nothing to do with your worth. You found your own lane. And now that you're focused on purpose, even your pain starts making sense. It wasn't there to stop you, it was shaping you. Choosing purpose means you stop showing up to arguments that no longer matter. You stop posting to be noticed. You stop entering rooms just to be accepted. You start asking deeper questions. Who am I when nobody's clapping? Who am I when the lights go off and it's just me and God? That's where your strength starts growing. That's where your character starts forming. Because proving yourself is always about someone else, but purpose is between you and your creator. You know why you're here now. You know what you're building. You've tasted what it feels like to do something that matters, not because it makes you look good, but because it makes others feel seen, feel healed, feel whole. That's your power now. And no one can take that from you. Not critics, not doubters, not the ghost of your past. You've outgrown the need to impress. They told you to get louder, to show off, to climb over others to be seen. But you chose another way. You chose impact over image, purpose over ego. You're not addicted to attention anymore. You don't need constant validation to feel alive. You've done the inner work. You've faced the mirror and accepted the version of you that used to beg for acceptance. And now you carry peace. A peace that says, I don't need to be in the spotlight to shine. Your actions speak louder than your words now. You move with quiet confidence. You build without posting every brick. You win without needing to announce it. And the crazy thing is, that's when the right people start to notice. That's when favor starts to follow you. Because you've aligned with something bigger than applause. You've aligned with your assignment. Purpose doesn't make you louder, it makes you deeper. It pulls you into something that fills your soul instead of draining it. You don't have to hustle for your worth anymore. You don't have to keep proving to your past that you're not who you used to be. You've made peace with your past. You've thanked it for the lessons. And now you're building forward, rooted in intention. Every step you take is about something greater than yourself. That's what makes you dangerous now. You're not moved by trends. You're not distracted by noise. You're driven by a vision that was planted in your spirit long before anyone else could see it. And you protect that vision, not by defending it, but by living it out quietly, relentlessly, unapologetically. Let them talk. Let them doubt. Let them whisper behind your back. You don't flinch anymore. You don't stop to defend. Because you've learned that purpose doesn't argue, it executes. Purpose doesn't explain, it expresses itself through consistency. You show up every day not because someone's watching, but because something inside of you says, this is who I am now. You've stopped reacting to criticism and started responding with progress. Your actions are louder than their opinions. Your consistency is louder than their gossip. And slowly, without even trying, you start becoming undeniable. Not because you forced them to see you, but because you never stopped walking in purpose, even when they couldn't. When you were younger, proving yourself felt like survival. But now you've built a foundation that doesn't shake every time someone misunderstands you. You've built self-respect, you've built spiritual confidence, you've built resilience. And with every brick you laid, you became more centered, more grounded, more sure of who you are. You don't need a stage to feel valuable. You don't need applause to feel seen. You don't need acceptance to feel secure. You've accepted yourself fully. And that's the most liberating feeling in the world. You are who you are, not because someone approved it, but because God ordained it. That's purpose. And now you protect that purpose like your life depends on it, because it does. Purpose has given you a reason to rise in the morning, a reason to move with integrity, a reason to show up when it's hard, and a reason to keep going when no one's watching. Proving yourself used to leave you drained. But purpose leaves you full. It breathes life into you. It wakes you up with vision. It gives your pain a place to pour into something meaningful. And that's where you are now. Not striving, not performing, just walking, aligned, anchored, chosen for something bigger than yourself. And that's more than enough. There was a time when every tear you saw felt like your own. You carried people's pain like it was your personal assignment to heal them. Their burdens became your burdens. Their chaos became your inner storm. You felt responsible for fixing, for saving, for carrying the weight of their healing on your shoulders. And maybe it came from your own wounds. Maybe you knew what it felt like to suffer alone. So you made it your mission to never let anyone feel that again. But somewhere along the way, you forgot yourself. You forgot your boundaries. You forgot your peace. You were drowning trying to rescue people who weren't even reaching for the rope. And now you've grown. You still see their pain. You still care deeply. But you no longer absorb what isn't yours to hold. That's wisdom. That's growth. That's spiritual maturity. You used to think love meant self-sacrifice. You believed empathy meant taking it all in, letting their pain live in your body, your spirit, your mind. You thought being a good friend, a good partner, a good person meant you had to suffer with them. But now you've learned compassion doesn't mean self-destruction. You can sit with someone in their sadness without letting it become your own. You can hold space without losing yourself in the process. You don't have to internalize everything to be helpful. You don't have to bleed just because they're hurting. You've realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone is to stand tall, rooted, steady, and not fall apart with them. Because when you stay grounded, you become a lighthouse, not another ship caught in the storm. You used to walk into a room and immediately feel everything. The tension, the heartbreak, the weight people carried that they didn't even speak about. It was like your soul had radar for brokenness. And while that made you deeply connected, it also left you deeply exhausted. You'd leave conversations drained, confused, burdened by energy that wasn't even yours. But now, you've set spiritual boundaries. You've done the work. You still walk in with awareness, still carry that gift of discernment, but now you're protected. You've built emotional armor that doesn't block love, but shields you from being consumed. You no longer confuse empathy with enmeshment. You no longer confuse awareness with absorption. You can witness someone's pain and still walk away in peace. You used to attract the broken, the wounded, the lost. And maybe a part of you liked it because healing them distracted you from healing yourself. But eventually it caught up with you. You realized that constantly absorbing other people's pain was a way to avoid sitting with your own. You were helping everyone else escape their darkness while ignoring the shadow living inside you. But purpose doesn't come from martyrdom, and healing isn't about carrying everyone's cross. So now when someone's hurting, you listen with love, but you don't take it home. You offer your presence, not your peace. You give your support, not your soul. You've learned to love without losing yourself. That's power. That's freedom. It doesn't mean you don't care. It doesn't mean you've hardened your heart. It means you've learned how to care in a way that's healthy, in a way that doesn't crush you, in a way that doesn't leave you empty after every interaction. You've learned that you can pray for them without losing sleep over them. You can show up without giving everything away. You can walk with someone through a season without making it your identity. That's emotional intelligence. That's spiritual alignment. You've become someone who brings calm into chaos instead of being consumed by it. You no longer absorb other people's storms. You just bring your umbrella and stay grounded in your own weather. You've become someone who understands that not every battle is yours to fight. Not every sadness is yours to carry. Not every meltdown needs your repair. And that doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. You now ask yourself, is this mine to carry? Before you take it on. You recognize the difference between supporting and saving, between helping and overextending. You used to carry guilt for walking away, for saying no, for choosing yourself. But now you carry peace because you've seen what it costs to say yes to everyone else while saying no to yourself. You've seen how heavy life becomes when you keep collecting pain that doesn't belong to you. And you've laid it down. You've set it down without shame. You've become the type of person who can sit beside someone while they break and not let your own heart shatter in the process. You can hear the pain in their voice, feel the sorrow in their eyes, and still stay centered. You don't need to match their energy to be present. You don't need to fall apart to show empathy. You've become a witness, not a vessel. And that's what real strength looks like. Being fully present while fully protected. Breathing with them, but not for them. Standing beside them, not beneath the weight of their pain. You've learned that you can be a soft place for others to land without making yourself a permanent landing strip for their trauma. The world doesn't teach this kind of strength. The world teaches us to give until we break, to love until we're depleted, to carry other people's burdens without boundaries. But now you move differently. You love from a place of overflow, not obligation. You give from a place of abundance, not emptiness. And because of that, your energy is sacred. Your peace is preserved. You're no longer the emotional sponge for everyone around you. You're the emotional anchor. Steady, calm, present. And when people come to you now, they don't find someone who's exhausted from carrying them. They find someone who lifts them with wisdom, not with weight. That's transformation. You've learned that emotional maturity isn't about how much pain you can hold. It's about how well you can navigate it. You no longer get pulled into every emotional tide that passes. You no longer drown just because someone else is sinking. You've mastered the art of compassion with boundaries. And that's what makes you powerful now. You still love deeply. You still see clearly. But you don't lose yourself anymore. You don't shrink to fit someone else's suffering. You stand in your truth, grounded in your purpose. And in doing so, you help others rise, not by carrying them, but by showing them they can carry themselves. That's healing. That's divine strength. And now you know, being a healer doesn't mean being a host for pain. Being a light doesn't mean burning yourself out for everyone else. You shine not by absorbing everyone's darkness, but by holding steady in your own light. And the people who are ready to heal, they'll feel that light. They'll be drawn to your peace, not your pain. You're no longer the fixer. You're the example. You're no longer the emotional container. You're the mirror, showing them what peace looks like. You see the pain, but you don't become it. You hear the sadness, but you don't carry it home. You love, but you stay whole. That's what it means to evolve. That's what it means to be truly free. There was a time when you were starving for approval. Every word you spoke, every move you made, every decision you considered, you filtered it through the question, will they accept me for this? You built your worth on the applause of others. If they smiled, you smiled. If they disapproved, you doubted. You spent your life auditioning for love, waiting to be picked, praying to be enough. And you wore yourself out trying to prove something that should have been yours from the start. The truth is, worthiness doesn't come from people's praise. It doesn't live in their acceptance. It doesn't rest in their validation. It lives in you. But when you don't know that, you become a reflection of whatever the world tells you to be, molded by opinions, shaped by rejection, defined by whether someone claps for you or not. That's no way to live. You used to break yourself into pieces just to be liked. You'd bite your tongue to stay agreeable. You'd shrink your dreams so no one would feel threatened. You'd downplay your brilliance so you wouldn't be called arrogant. And every time you did that, you told your soul you're only lovable if you make people comfortable. But now, you're done negotiating your worth. You don't need permission to be great. You don't need confirmation to feel seen. You don't need someone to tell you you matter. You already know it. Your validation doesn't come from likes or applause or compliments. It comes from your alignment, your peace, your integrity. You've stopped editing your authenticity to win people over because you finally realized that real love, real connection, real belonging, they don't require performance. They require presence. And you are enough just as you are. You remember how it felt to post something and stare at your phone waiting for approval? How one person's silence felt like a rejection? How one negative comment could ruin your whole day? You were a slave to feedback. And let's be honest, it wasn't just about social media. It was family, friends, lovers, bosses. You let other people write your value in ink you didn't even choose. Their validation became your scoreboard. If they approved, you were winning. If they didn't, you spiraled. But now you've grown. You don't let external noise drown out your inner voice. You've learned that not everyone will see your worth, and that doesn't change a thing. You don't need everyone to like you. You don't need everyone to agree. You just need to be true to you. That's power. That's peace. That's walking in your light without needing a spotlight. You know now that people's opinions are not facts. Their projections aren't your reflection. Their acceptance isn't your fuel. When you live for validation, you die by rejection. You live like a puppet waiting for a string to be pulled before you move. But you're not here to perform anymore. You're not here to prove. You're here to be. And being requires no explanation. It requires no approval. It requires no stamp from the crowd. That's what self-worth sounds like. It's quiet, steady, and immovable. It says, I am enough because I exist. I don't need to hustle to be loved. I don't need to impress to be seen. I don't need to earn what I already am. You stopped asking people to give you what they're not even qualified to define. And in that, you found freedom. real freedom. You used to fear rejection like it was a death sentence. One no could send you into self-doubt. One cold look could make you question your whole being. But now you understand, rejection is not a reflection of your value. It's a redirection. It's a filter that removes what doesn't belong in your divine path. You don't chase validation because you've realized that being rejected by the wrong people is a blessing. You don't belong everywhere. You're not meant to fit into every room. You're not built for every table. And that's okay. Because when you stop needing everyone's yes, you finally say yes to yourself. You build your own table, you write your own script, you validate your own existence, and nothing is more powerful than someone who doesn't need approval to walk in their purpose. You now know the difference between genuine connection and validation seeking. When you needed validation, every relationship felt fragile. Every moment felt like a test. You were constantly on edge, trying not to disappoint, trying not to lose favor. But love isn't supposed to feel like pressure. Friendship isn't supposed to feel like a performance. You've stopped trying to be liked and started trying to be real. You don't need to be liked by everyone. You just need to be liked by the right ones. The ones who love you not for what you can do, but for who you are. The ones who see your worth even in your silence, even in your stillness, even in your flaws. And now that you've let go of needing validation, you're attracting relationships built on truth, not transaction. You used to define yourself by comparison. If someone else had more, looked better, spoke louder, achieved faster, you felt less than. But comparison is just another form of validation addiction. It keeps you chasing shadows, measuring your worth on someone else's ruler. But now, you stay in your lane. You celebrate others without questioning yourself. You cheer without envy. You lift without lack. Because you know there's enough room for everyone to shine. And someone else's glow doesn't dim your light. You've stopped letting the outside world define your inside world. You've stopped needing to outperform to feel seen. You've stopped needing to outshine to feel worthy. Now you compete only with yesterday's version of you. That's confidence. That's maturity. That's what happens when you know who you are. There's a quiet kind of strength that comes when you stop begging for approval. You walk differently. You speak differently. You carry yourself like you belong. Because you do. Not because someone said so. Not because you got applause. But because you know. And that knowing is unshakable. It's not arrogance. It's alignment. It's not pride. It's presence. You walk into a room and don't need to be the loudest. You don't need to be the most impressive. You don't need to convince anyone of anything. Your energy speaks before you do. It says, I'm enough. I'm whole. I'm worthy. And people feel that. People recognize that. Because when you no longer need validation, you become magnetic, not because you're seeking, but because you're secure. You've come to understand that real worthiness doesn't demand a stage. It doesn't beg for likes. It doesn't perform. It just is. And when you reach that place, peace follows. You stop being reactive. You stop chasing. You stop bending just to be accepted. You no longer need to explain your value to anyone. You just live it. You embody it. And the ones who get it will get it. The ones who don't, let them go. Because you don't need a crowd. You need clarity. And your clarity says, I am valuable whether you see it or not. I am worthy whether you clap or not. I am enough even in silence. That's your truth now. And you wear it with grace, with strength, with unshakable calm. You've spent too much of your life trying to be someone people would approve of. But now you're becoming someone you approve of. Someone you respect, someone you're proud to wake up as every morning. You've built that from the inside out. You've created it through pain, through healing, through solitude, through self-reflection. And now you no longer need to convince anyone of your worth because it's not up for debate. It's not a vote. It's not a scoreboard. It's not fragile. It's not temporary. It's eternal. It's embedded in your being. You've stopped waiting to be chosen because you already chose yourself. That's where your power lives now, not in their hands, but in your heart. That's what it means to truly be free. You no longer move through life the same way. You don't react out of pain anymore. You respond with wisdom. You don't let your triggers run your decisions. You pause, breathe, and move with intention. You no longer need apologies to release people from your spirit. You forgive to free yourself because your peace matters more than your pride. You stop proving yourself to people who never really saw you. You started walking in purpose, not performance. You stopped absorbing every drop of pain from the world around you. You now know how to hold space without losing yourself in the process. You no longer confuse empathy with enmeshment. You've become solid, still, free. And that's what this entire journey was about. Not perfection, not performance, but transformation. You faced your shadow, and instead of letting it dominate your energy, you learned from it. You grew from it. You rose above it. You stopped letting it drive the car, and now it rides in the back seat where it belongs. And in doing so, you've unlocked something sacred. You've learned to protect your peace. You've chosen love over fear, boundaries over burnout, wisdom over emotional chaos. You are no longer who you were. And the world is about to witness what happens when someone walks fully in their truth. This kind of growth is quiet, but it's powerful. It's not loud, but it's undeniable. And the people around you, they'll feel the shift. They'll notice the way you don't argue like you used to, the way you protect your energy, the way you love without needing anything in return, because now you're rooted in something deeper. You've tapped into a strength that's not dependent on applause or approval. You walk in integrity, in grace, in clarity. You've become the calm in the storm. You've become your own sanctuary. So keep going. Keep choosing peace. Keep choosing growth. Your light is no longer clouded by the shadows of your past. You've earned this freedom. You've stepped into a new version of yourself, and no one can take that from you. Not the pain, not the past, not the people who once misunderstood you. You are the proof that healing is possible, that change is real, that the soul can rise again and again. Thank you for walking this journey. May your days be full of peace, your heart full of purpose, and your spirit forever unshaken. God bless you. Stay strong. Stay steady. Stay in your light.